Having introduced strategic management in our outline, it is necessary for us to transition to the conceiving of strategy. In the process, we're going to be looking into strategic thinking, the planning of strategy, the conceiving of strategy. There are various factors that we're going to be able to draw from. We're going to look into various theorists and then get into the framing of strategy so that the time we have helps us to revisit the strategy you already have or are about to be able to put in place so as to ensure that you are able to distinguish yourself in the marketplace. In his essay, As a Man Thinketh, So Is He, James Allen challenges us to reflect on what we think about, because thoughts become things. Peter Drucker, a guru in leadership and strategy, asks that we should be able to check among ourselves 5 key questions. What is our business? What should our business be? Who is the customer we are servicing? What is of value to that customer? And then, how can we reach the customer? Dr. Ansoff says there are 4 basic alternatives that are open to any business. The business can either grow through increased market penetration, or through market development, or product development, and then it could also be able to grow through diversification. Here, we're looking at the interplay of old market versus new markets, old products versus new products. When we have old products being brought through to the same old market, we look into market penetration. When we've got new products being brought into an old market, we need a strategy thinking that is about product development. On the other hand, when we've got old products coming into a new market altogether, we need to be developing that market. When we've got a new product and a new market, as has been with the advent of WhatsApp, with the advent of Twitter, all of these have come with product diversification. And this is an option that is open to us as we think strategically about our own agri-business. Shaping most of strategic thinking and the tail end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century is Professor Michael E. Porter from Harvard Business School. Way back in 1979, he came up with the 5 forces that shape industry competition. And of course, as an aeronautical engineer, he looked into the airline business and came to appreciate that every entity that is seeking to be able to get into the marketplace will be looking into who else is in that space and what are they offering currently, and therefore determine what can they bring. So there's always a rivalry among existing competitors, whether it is in the transportation industry or in the agricultural sector like you're in. While dealing with that, it is important to be able to determine whether there is a possibility that at an input level, the suppliers could constrain and fix the pricing, and at the selling part, is it possible that the buyers can come together and have the capacity to force down our prices by the way in which they are together in stock fill format, as happens in our country? Anyone who's doing business would also be needing to be cognizant of the fact that there are going to be new entrants in the marketplace, regardless of the conditions as they appear now with COVID-19. As you think about the new entrants, it is also necessary, Michael Porter warns us, that you think about possible substitutes to the products or services that you're rendering. There will always be a shift. There will always be somebody who's looking into, in car manufacturing, instead of having a steel throughout, there is fiberglass. These are substitutes that have been brought through in order to be able to lighten the vehicle. But that's not all. There are other substitutes that are coming that we need to be able to pay attention to. In the world of agriculture, you would better know whether there will be substitutes at a seed level, at a fertilizer level, and any other part of the value chain. To survive in business, it is important to be able to identify and maintain a strategic competitive position. You will achieve that when you successfully formulate and implement a value-creating strategy. Without that, your competitiveness is questionable. Having secured strategic competitiveness, we then need to be able to look into what advantage do we have in the marketplace. We will have a strategic advantage when our firm successfully implements our strategy and creates superior value for our customers. And the competitors will find it very difficult to duplicate or too costly to try and imitate what we are doing. That strategic advantage requires us to constantly be asking, why are we doing what we're doing? And then look into the process that we are going to be able to follow to execute the strategy we have formulated. Starting with why leaves us in a purposeful zone all the time. And when we operate from a motivation with a clear why, the what will follow with ease. Having clearly identified the need in the marketplace and chosen to provide strategic value, we would need to be able to communicate a value proposition. And that would come from best cost or offering best products in the marketplace and or offering best services. Either of the three would be a solution to an existing pain or a pain that is still to come. We then may want to be able to benchmark ourselves against others in the same space as ourselves. On the other hand, we may decide benchmarking is not the thing we want to worry ourselves about. We will just differentiate ourselves in the marketplace and do things that others will follow. As we look into framing value proposition for our organization, we need to be clear about the value we offer because that gives the why for the customers to conduct business with us. We check key stakeholders and the business context within which we operate. That tells us where we should be focusing. Our individual ability, each and every one of our employees, and the organization's capability, along with the leadership, will define what will make it possible to offer the value in the marketplace and indeed deliver value in the marketplace. How do we get that sorted out? Well, how we are structured will play a big part. The analytics on all the data that we're gathering, and reflected on value proposition, we now need to be able to talk to strategy. And let's give some definition. Strategy is an integrated and coordinated set of commitments and actions that are designed to exploit the organization's core competencies and gain a competitive edge in the marketplace. Utilizing that framing of integrated and coordinated commitments and actions will distinguish whether we're being strategic or merely operational. Clem Santa and Chantal Aubry made a recommendation a decade ago That when we look into strategy, it is critical for us to be able to ask about 10 questions. We'll focus on the first 5 right here. First, we need to be looking into our context. How has the game in our industry changed? COVID or not COVID? Where is it headed? And how have we fared up until now as players? We need to be clear about that. Second, we need to look into our scope. What is our playing field like today? And is it likely to be expanding or contracting? And the lines of developing context and the resources that we have at our disposal. Third becomes a critical point when you're starting to look into who else is playing in the field. Who is playing in a manner that could most advance or retard our strategy? Who couldn't be bothered? And how should you handle those currently and into the future? Fourth area is a critical one, because if we do not understand the rules of the game that govern our strategy under all scenarios, we're likely to fail before we start playing. The fifth question for us to ask is about uncertainties. The world of business is not one where things are clearly laid out. We need to be able to ask, what are the key uncertainties that could have a significant impact on how we play the game that we're involved in and divert our course either positively or negatively. In the space of COVID-19, some of the uncertainties we have are around environmental matters and the people that we are engaging with, the customers, their health, their futures. All of these are things we need to pay attention to. After considering the first 5 questions raised by Chantal Ilbury and Clem Santa, it is worth checking as we seek to grow our enterprises. What's the trend? Are we engaging in free range, organically growing products that we have? What is the key trend? Where are opportunities, and what opportunities are coming up now as a result of the changes that are taking place, as a result of the trends taking place? More and more, we're learning Generation X and baby boomers are choosing to improve their eating habits. Does that open up opportunities for us? And how are we positioned in the minds of the customer? How are we positioned physically in terms of location? And how aligned are our systems? How aligned are our processes from planting to harvest to distribution? And finally, what capabilities do we have to ensure that we take advantage of the opportunities that are coming from the current trend? And what competencies do we already have that helped us to define our opportunity to participate in the industry as we are in it right now? Virtually all strategy conversations have what is referred to as a pastel analysis of the operating environment. We've extended this to 8 factors instead of 6. We begin the process by looking into social factors that are in the marketplace. And we do need to be able to pay attention to social trends and see to it that our strategy is responding appropriately. Technology is driving much of the changes that are taking place, and the designs of strategy are informed by what technology we have. Right now, we have a virtual learning program through which you are gathering the information in the lesson at your own pace. Ecological factors are becoming all the more critical as we look into the environment and we say we want to leave for future generations an environment wherein they can be proud of us having not denigrated it. We have signed various protocols, including the Kyoto and Paris protocols around environmental matters. The political environment is always going to be affecting us, whether we are in a developing economy or a developed economy. Well, ours is a developing one, and politics have a huge influence into economics. The legislative environment and the active involvement, among others, of the courts in the country do tell us that we need to be able to monitor how we are abiding by and complying with legislation that govern our operations. And then the economy itself. We need to be able to make sure that we are monitoring the economic development, whether they be at a regional level or at a continental level. What we are bringing forth now is the health factor. We are beginning to find the importance of understanding the health state of our employees and the health state of the organizations we are doing business with. We also want to be checking the health state of the suppliers, because if the entities that we are operating with are filled with people whose health status is worrisome, we cannot be guaranteed that we will be able to take delivery from them, because we might find that the whole entity, the whole organization is suffering because of a positive COVID status. Finally, it is critical to be able to look into demographics. Here, what I would like for you to be able to pay attention to is that we're operating in this year with at least 6 generations. We have the builders or silent generation, which is people born in the 1930s up to about 1964. And then you've got the boomers who are coming in from that period. And flowing from the boomers, you've got Generation X, and flowing from Generation X, you've got Generation Y, or the millennials, and flowing from that is the youngest generation called Generation Z. And Generation Z are people who are often referred to as born frees. And then we now have the recent entry of World Cup 2010. They're called the Alpha generation. In about 5 years' time, they will be able to have their own licenses, and they will be able to vote shortly thereafter. What it is that they do, what excites them, will inform our strategies inside our organizations. So what I'd like for you to be able to do is to take as an action the next bit, how these factors influence strategy. So take some time looking into the 8 elements and say, what is the key trend at a social level in terms of migration? What is the trend at technology, ecology, politically, legislatively, economically, health-wise, as well as demographic? And then when you've noticed the trend, ask, what are the opportunities that come with the trend? As it is, working from home has become something that we are learning and getting to appreciate in more than 500 days of COVID-19 and the pandemic. How are we positioned around that? How is your organization positioned to take advantage of the opportunities that the trends are bringing? Spend some time around that. It should take you at the most about 15 minutes. Having checked the context within which your business operates, you would want to be able to demonstrate your agility as a leader. The agility of leadership begins with us anticipating the changes before they happen, and then generating the necessary confidence amongst the people that are working with us and ourselves to be able to take on the challenges. When we initiate some action, we build on that confidence that has already been generated, but we also get to be able to learn what works and what doesn't. The next point is to be able to liberate the thinking, because if it is not going to be just one person thinking all the time, we then are going to be able to have ideas generated from all over, which build this organization into a world beater. And finally, we need to be able to evaluate. We've gotten to here utilizing the strategies and practices we've heard. What has brought us here will not take us to where we need to be able to get to. So let's review the results we've got, how we got them, and what we want to repeat versus what we want to leave behind so we can travel light into the future. Agile leaders are constantly scanning the environment and checking how it is that they can position their organization better to play the strategic game well. So, what are possible scenarios you might have? In our country, we've just had inhumanity as one of the scenarios approaches that has been reviewed in just over a year of observing the conduct we have. Statistician Dr. Pali has been instrumental in guiding the conversation around those, because these are measuring against the National Development Plan 2030. Then you need to be able to ask, so how do we position ourselves against each and every one of the strategies that are available so as to ensure that we become winners? You will also recall that there is a need to be able to look inward into the organization and say, what are the strengths we already have which we can take advantage of and make sure that we are competitive in the work we do? And what are the weaknesses which, if not paid attention to, may render us to be victims instead of victors? But we want to be able to measure those in the light of what's happening outside. What is being afforded to us as immediate opportunities that have arisen, and what are potential threats? Now, that discussion is a discussion that you would be familiar with, because when we're doing the risk analysis module, we spent quite a considerable amount of time on just that aspect. An activity I'd like for you to be able to engage with right now is looking into your strategy in relation to what's happening internally versus what the environment is speaking to externally. And as you look into that, your external opportunities versus your internal strengths, you would be able to formulate a strengths opportunities strategy. Also, when you're looking externally at threats, you can formulate a strengths threats strategy. Also, the next thing to be able to consider is looking externally to the opportunities versus your weaknesses and formulate a weakness opportunity strategy. And finally, when you look at your threats versus your weaknesses, you can formulate a weakness threats strategy. In all four of those, you are able to then determine which requires most of your attention and which you don't have to be working too hard on. Why is that important? Well, the next element is critical. It is important to be able to know what it is you can control, and it is important to also determine what you can influence and that which you can do nothing about. So in the formulation of the strategy with internal and external factors, you want to be able to look into maximizing things you can control, things you can influence, and pay less attention to those things you really have no control or influence over. With clarity around what you can control, what you can influence, and what you can do nothing about, you are able to formulate some options. You ask the question, what options within your span of controls do you have to improve the scope of your game, to improve your performance in the game? Then you can take some decisions. Which options right now do you want to turn into decisions, and what will be the initial action associated with each decision? That decision-making process takes you back to agile leadership. And finally, you're wanting to be able to look into your strategic outcomes. Your strategic outcomes will be informed by your clarity around what winning looks like, the meaning of winning. In 2026, what will winning look like? By that time, the Alpha generation, the Z generation, and the Y generation will be constituting more than 50% of the workforce. What will winning look like in measurable terms? It's a critical thing to be able to look into. When we are clear about what winning looks like, we are able to attract talent we want to come and help advance our objectives. We are able to develop existing talent inside our organization, while at the same time retaining the ones we want and letting go of the ones we would rather not be with us.